Hey everyone, so thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much to the House of Web3 Edge and Node for hosting us today. Yeah, I wanted to thank our sponsors, both Mezzo and the Lifted Institute. So the Lifted Institute is working with Morpheus and in their Web3 decentralized AWS platform Manifest to help create platforms for decentralized AI. So if you are building a decentralized AI project and are looking for infrastructure or a way to raise money, come talk to me. And I wanted to thank all of our panelists and our moderator for being here tonight with us, and I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks to Crypto Mondays, all the sponsors, House of Web3, for hosting us tonight. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll have the panelists introduce themselves. My name is Eric Forst. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bloxy. We're a Web3 customer engagement platform based on the idea that the wallet is the new cookie. Personally, for me, Web3 is all about giving users, average consumers, more control of their data and their content and ways to monetize it. And sometimes that involves blockchains. I'll stop there and let this be about the panelists. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Eric. My name's Dan Bramer. I'm a co-founder of Venture 23. I say we're a full stack Web3 development company. We build DeFi, games, NFTs across many of the leading blockchain platforms. And we'll get into other things as the panel evolves, I guess.
Why don't you mention just a few of the projects you're working on also? Just like describe the specific apps for each of you.
Sure. Yeah, one of our biggest efforts is actually in with the DeFi platform we built called Balanced.network, where we're building that cross-chain. The main value that the Icon chain is building now is with their general message passing protocol, XCall, and Balanced is heavily using that right now to build across many different chains. And then in coordination with Eric, we're also building something that is intended to help out with the mission of We Heart SF, which meets here on Wednesdays. It's called Local Coin. We're building that on Stellar, and that's a closed cycle token system that allows people to create a campaign that'll distribute funds in a controlled manner that can be spent at local merchants.
Awesome.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary Gribben, and I'm a UX designer from the early days, like Gen 1 websites. Closer, yeah, okay. And thanks for having me, Eric, and everybody here at the House of Web3. I love this space. I've been working here for a while. Let's see, I'm working on Rainfall. So Rainfall is a self-sovereign personal AI platform. We help you monetize your data and create real-time insights, social intelligence from your permission data to create sort of like a circular economy where buyers pay us for the insights and then we give part of those proceeds back to the data creators. Yeah, and I've worked in the ecosystem for quite a while, since around 2017. I started at Consensus in the early days, worked there through the beginning of COVID, and then with Centrifuge, a DeFi protocol out of Europe, worked consulting on various projects, and it's really, for me, been a lot about the stuff that we thought we could do in the beginning that sort of became all monopolized and twisted up in the middle, and we're hoping we have this sort of spirit of with decentralization and to create a more equitable future for everyone on the planet.
And Mary is humble, but she has a master's in design
communications,
communications and design from Pratt, and so she's actually our professional graphic designer, even though UX is
our
much
UX
more
designer,
more than designer.
Yeah,
UX on this panel. So thank you, Mary.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Mills. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mezzo. I've spent my career building in fintech, first at a company called Braintree, which is a B2B online payments API, and then leading product at Venmo. And as much as I love fintech, I frankly just didn't believe that we were going to be able to have the impact that we wanted to, trying to build on legacy Rails. So I took a break, and then in 2020, after we sold a startup, was trying to figure out what to do, and that's when I finally went down the rabbit hole, really understood smart contracts, public key encryption, blockchain, and that kind of was the aha moment where I was like, this is the future of fintech. This is what we've been looking for. And so at Mezzo, we're really trying to build infrastructure that lets crypto developers connect with users' bank accounts as easily as they connect with wallets. We want apps to be able to build their own on and off ramps, but without having to handle compliance, security, all of that, and stay like small and lean, which is my favorite part about the teams building Web3.
All right, so let's get some questions going. We'll do a few questions and then we'll open up to the audience. So I was really lucky in 2013 to get invited into this Facebook group called Radical Decentralization. And I invited my dad in, and he had a PhD in information systems. And we had guys in there with PhDs in computer science from MIT. And everyone was talking about, what is Bitcoin? Is it digital gold? Is it digital fiat? Is it something else? Is it something new? And these macro conversations were really interesting. And, we watched the price go from $100 to $1,100 on this exchange called Mt. Gox, and heard about all these scams and terrible stuff happening, people losing all their crypto. It was a really weird time. But then Mt. Gox crashed, the neglect was exposed, and this thing called Coinbase appeared. And it was here in the Bay Area. It was a bunch of American guys. They were backed by Sequoia. It had a really familiar user interface. It just kind of felt like PayPal. It felt like a bank. And so that was when my dad and I had the confidence, luckily in 2014, to start investing in Bitcoin. But that was a user experience and an onboarding experience that was how a lot of us got into crypto in the first wave. So now we have had FTX. We have had all kinds of people's wallets get scammed. We've had people have a really hard time installing wallets. So before FTX was a problem, just Web3 being hard to get into was a problem, right? And so what I would love for each of you to talk about is, how are you making it easy? How are we going to create like the next Coinbase moment for the 99% of people in the world who aren't in Web 2 and Web 3 or in Web 2, so that they can come into Web 3? To go first, Dan?
Sure, thanks, Eric. Yeah, no doubt. I got in about the same time Eric did, and I had the same sort of experience figuring out how to buy Bitcoin, and went through Coinbase. And I don't think it's really gotten a lot better up until today. If anything, it's gotten more complex and confusing for most people, and it's an outstanding problem. But I think, on the other hand, there are some technologies emerging now that we can build into products to make them more usable. And of course, as always, the usual guidelines for good UX apply, just like they always have. And that's something that I try to have our team come back to. We're a very technology focused team, but in our partnership on the balanced DEX, we had a UX group out of New Zealand as a partner, and they've seen that through, put a lot of time into really good, smooth, intuitive experience for this DEX, and it does work really well. And now as that's going to cross-chain, we have a very smooth and usable experience for bridging assets between chains, and actually partnered with a partner project, the HANA Wallet. HANA Wallet makes things a lot easier by having one seed phrase to control assets on multiple chains. So it will automatically, if you bridge from Icon to Archway, HANA automatically has an address for you on Archway. You don't have to set up another wallet. So that's one of the biggest user frictions in cross-chain stuff, and everything's going to have to be smoothly flowing across chains. Is you go into a new chain, you've got to figure out what wallet do they use there. All sorts of stuff you have to figure out. So there's this technology layer that we've got to make smoother, but still the focus has to be on just the same challenges of user experience that we've always had, that you've got to think through from the perspective of the user. when they're onboarding, take them one step at a time smoothly. And that's where the focus has to be, not so much on the technology. The technologists still get through it.
Awesome. Mary?
Yeah, I would build on that. I'm just say that if you don't have a designer on your team or somebody who understands design thinking, and you're starting, you have a startup in this space, you're already handicapped. That's you need to be able to solve the problems with human-centered design thinking, and then all the principles apply, and we have to get away from the jargon, and make it simple and easy for people and delight them along the way, and create it as not just a user experience but a brand experience. What are your principles and values, and how do they live through the product and the experience of what you're designing for. So
when I signed up for Rainfall, it was really easy. I don't remember any friction.
No, there's no jargon too. The words are chose super carefully. We chose the words really carefully. And, again, like with everything, it doesn't matter if it's Web3 or what it is, learn, test and learn. It's you have to test and learn and put it in front of people, put it in front of the actual people that you're designing it for, right away. Don't wait to validate your product. And even with the devs, right? It doesn't matter if it's like an end consumer or if it's a developer engineer that's going to use it. If you do those studies and get that input, you can design it better. You'll find out what their pain points are and you'll fix them. And we knew right away. I had theories, but once I put it out there, I knew what we had to eliminate and what we had to enhance. And so, I also feel like this space now, we should try to incorporate as much as possible, like learning and sort of educational content wherever possible, and like tips, and sort of demystify it for people. I think it's really, really important.
Explain stuff that people aren't used to seeing every day.
Yeah. And
What's
then
a node?
Exactly.
I think the idea of education is really interesting. I think one of the things that I really feel we need to be careful about with UX is actually not trying to abstract things too quickly. Like in some ways, I think you can look at what happened with FTX or CFI in general over the last cycle as trying to abstract and give an easy experience too quickly. Like in my mind, a lot of people think UX and think easy. Sometimes making things not easy is good UX. And so a lot of what we're trying to do at Mezzo is meet crypto where it is today. And so I think what that means is we're trying to build products that actually work really well for crypto native users, because our belief is there's still, frankly, a lot more work that has to go into the infrastructure level, into the protocols themselves, before we're at a place where you can actually onboard 1 billion users. We're just not ready right now. It's not there yet. And I think that trying to take shortcuts to get there is going to just either hurt us, which is what we saw with CFI and FTX, or it's going to dilute the real value of crypto. In my mind, the thing that I get most excited about is if I think about what it would take to build a P2P app like Venmo today in Web 2, it's a Herculean effort. You have to spend millions of dollars. You need multiple vendors. You need a big team, a compliance team, a risk team, etc. You don't need any of that in crypto. And so that to me is the real value. And the moment we start to kind of get a little loosey-goosey with is this self-custodial or is this not, you start to really get close enough to where regulators are that all sounds like bullshit. You are actually centralized, and now you have to meet all the same rules and regulations that Web 2 fintech companies do, which really defeats the purpose of crypto, in my opinion. The one other thing I'd say about just onboarding new people to crypto, one of the things that we feel is very important is the idea of fiat off-ramps, which sounds really funny, and I think a lot of crypto people don't like to think about off-ramps. But one of the really interesting things we saw at Venmo was the easier we made it to take money out of Venmo, the more people put money in Venmo. And when we talk to users about it, it's very obvious, which is everyone is a little skeptical of a new financial product or app. that is natural, and like we should really expect that as we think about crypto. And so the easier you make it to get in and out, the more the user's willing to experiment. And once you let them experiment, then you hook them and you can close them. And so to me, I see off-ramping as actually like a fundamental way to oddly onboard people, because that gives them the comfort of like, okay, I can get this money out.
That's awesome. That's the psychology of security, right? Like that I just feel safe. So I know I can just leave it here and not have to worry about it. That's awesome. So the next question is, are there any specific protocols like ERC-4337 as a an account abstraction protocol in Ethereum, specific types of smart contracts or code or partnerships you're implementing to make things easier? Start with who wants to go first?
All right. I mean, I think the 4337 or the new EIP that's coming live in the next hard fork, I think are both great steps in the right direction. Because in my mind, like the problems I think that needs to get solved before we actually are ready to onboard people, they're like one, like I'm obviously a little biased, but I believe it is seamless interaction between fiat and crypto. But the other two are much harder: safety and privacy. Privacy is a whole nother topic, and it's sadly like mired in like regulatory uncertainty. But safety is something we can solve today, and I think that like one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on is like building a product that can work with the next generation of wallets, but still work great with EOAs and like MetaMask and Phantom and others.
And what about ZK identity? You mentioned earlier you were experimenting with ZK as a way to protect privacy, right? And
That's right.
There's all different ways to do anonymity, but that's become the real fad. Do you like that way?
Yeah, I think the one of probably the hardest long-term problems that any kind of like fiat crypto company needs to solve is fraud. Like at Venmo, fraud was a massive problem for us, but we had two chances to stop users: when the money was coming in and when the money was coming out. At Mezzo, we have one chance, because the moment we send it, it's gone. Like we in my mind, when I think onboarding, and I should have said this at the beginning, I'm only interested in onboarding people into self-custody. And so if we're going to send money to a self-custodial wallet, it's gone. And the more data we can get about a user, the better we can do at fraud, which thus allows us to have lower fees. So that's a good thing. But in my mind, I don't want to collect user data. And so I get really excited about like long-term ZK, but even in the short term, we're seeing really interesting things like decentralized identity protocols like Gitcoin Passport, which allows a third party to kind of actually have the data. And then as long as we as an institution trust Gitcoin, we don't need to ever see the user's social media history, GitHub profile, whatever kind of data you want, but we can leverage it into our fraud models. So that's definitely something we're really excited about.
That's very cool. I can't wait to try your app. Is it live?
Yep. Yeah, we're live in a few different apps on Solana and Ethereum, and we have like a test app live. If anyone wants to play with it, it's mezzo.cash.
Very cool. Dan, Mary, either of you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one technology we are using a lot now is with Sui. We're building on Sui, and we really like their ZK login, which leverages the ZK technology. And that it just in general makes onboarding people into crypto a lot easier, because with it, people can log in using their email address, and they don't have to remember private key or whatever the phrase to generate keys. But it also has some challenges. As a developer, you've got to understand its uses and limitations. And then as far as privacy in general goes, we are also building on Alio, which we really like. It's headquartered here in the Bay Area too. It's a privacy chain. And we're also partnering with Railgun, which is a privacy protocol on Ethereum. And both of those are sort of protecting against fraud, KYC, AML, by monitoring the ins and outs. So we're building a bridge for Alio, which will be onboarding liquidity into Alio from Ethereum. And so we're going to be checking all transfers to and from Ethereum. If a transfer comes in from an OFAC sanctioned address, that gets frozen. If it's going out to an OFAC sanctioned address, that gets frozen. There's still, you could still manage to get some funds in there and do some illicit things with them. So it's not a perfect solution, this sort of checking on the ins and outs. But that's one way that people are trying to deal with ZK. In general, though, one more word on ZK. Unfortunately, to do ZK transactions, it still takes a lot of computing power, and to generate a proof takes a lot of time. So the usability isn't really there yet for a lot of things. But ZK login on SUI is one way it can be used.
That's great. Good to know. Go SUI. Mary?
I guess I could talk about our partnership with Nillion. So we recently partnered with them, and they're doing decentralized blind compute. I think that's the right way to explain it,
Yeah.
so that we can, really ensure the user, the the data creator, that their personal identifiable information is completely secure and never leaves their device. And yeah,
That's
just
good.
pretty- yeah,
That's a good user experience,
Yeah,
right?
I mean-
people want to feel that their
Yeah,
identity is
you were-
protected, that they're in control of their data, and that it can be shared in an anonymized way. That's
yeah,
great.
exactly.
So AI is all the rage. Who's used AI? There's a lot of talk about how it makes our lives easier, and we're certainly looking at how can we just have a chat interface as a way to ask our platform to do queries and things like that. I mean, we think that's certainly where the future is going. So, how are you all thinking about AI and how it can help the user experience?
Yeah, so just a couple words here. One way we have used it is we've created chatbots that we've fed all of the information for one of our games into. So that acts as sort of an easy way to create a support system where people can ask any free-form question about our products. We've built a couple of these sort of chatbots as sort of support products, and that helps a lot. That's one way, practical way we can use AI right now.
We are thinking about using it for educational content, for learning content. Our friends over, you know them, right? Arndt and Christian at learn.xyz. You can create, these little very quick opportunities for people to learn about complex stuff, and they get rewarded along the way. And so we thought about doing that.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think we use AI in a few different ways. I mean, like I mentioned before, fraud is one of the hardest problems for us, and that's a place where AI is very, very useful. A lot of the AI we're using right now is more, let's call it traditional AI, more just like machine learning and pre-trained models. Where we're thinking about LLMs is one of the really hard problems is we get a bunch of kind of risk signals, but it still requires a human to look at it and be like, it collectively, is this fraud or not? And this is especially hard in crypto because a lot of the things that traditionally in fintech you would flag as obviously suspicious aren't. Like VPN usage is a great example. Like initially we did the kind of like normal best practices of blocking all VPN access. And then it's like, turns out almost everyone in crypto uses VPNs. So we had to think about a different way to approach that. And so that's the first step. And then I think the other step is customer support in any kind of financial app is absolutely critical. This was a lesson that Venmo learned the hard way. We did not invest in customer support at all. And then we kind of quickly turned it around and became probably one of the biggest teams we had, not just obviously the customer support agents, but even on the engineering side. And that's just because we saw every time that we had a good experience for a customer, it made them an advocate of Venmo. And so we expect customer support to be a core competency of Mezzo, but we have the luxury of being right at the start of this kind of next generation of AI that's exploding. So our hope is that we can deliver like world-class support without scaling to an absolutely massive customer support team.
So there's all kinds of AI we can use. There are the big centralized large language models that OpenAI and Google and all the rest are making. There's decentralized AI. There's BitTensor, there's Lumino, there's Morpheus. And so, you can host AI models, you can run AI off of decentralized networks now. So as Web3 companies, do you feel like it's important that we embrace decentralized AI, or does it matter if we use OpenAI?
I think I actually have to say right off the bat, I don't know really about any of these decentralized AI products. And in general, my thinking with that is if the technologies, if it could be too early, you may be better off sticking with something that's more reliable, and I don't know that the decentralized AI is there yet, but At the same time, when things are ready, we do want to be ready to jump on them. So I'm going to be looking into it a little bit more and following it. I tend to be a bit of an idealist when I can be.
I'm definitely an idealist. Yeah, we are decentralized AI, so
you are using it, or you are a
We
decentralized
are
AI. You have your
decentralized
own model.
Yeah, we have our
And,
models.
and how do you host it in a decentralized way? How do you make it
These are going to
decentralized?
be questions that are just going to like, yeah.
But
I can show
that's
you
incredible.
diagrams
So
later.
you're not using AI on the data you collect. You actually have AI. That's your own model. That's
Yeah,
very
it's
cool.
our own
Okay.
model,
That's
yeah.
very, very cool.
Yeah, I think I similarly am looking at it more just on like what's going to give us the best performance. I think that in my mind, at least right now, what I see is probably more important than decentralized AI is open source AI. And like some of that is on principle. Like I'm a huge proponent of open source. That was a big reason I got involved in crypto. Is I saw a lot of similarities with like open source communities, and like this is fantastic. But also just practically, it's faster. Like being able to run like one of the things we think a lot about is speed. Like a huge problem in my mind with most on ramps, most exchanges is it takes minutes, maybe at best, to get a transfer out of that exchange or on ramp into your wallet. Right now, our average processing time is between 10 and 15 seconds. So we literally care about like milliseconds in our experience. And so waiting to go over the network to hit OpenAI or Anthropic doesn't work. Like we'd much rather have a local model.
And are you using Llama? Are there other open source models?
I mean, the sad reality is, and this may have changed as of this week with Llama 3, but most of the models were just nowhere close to what we could get out of the like cutting edge centralized models.
That makes sense. So we're going to open up to the audience in a second, but before that, just any final thoughts, anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about and how you're making Web3 easier to use to onboard into?
I'm not sure if I have an answer exactly to that question, but I have this idea that I'd like to share of, in general, onboarding, that just thinking about a user's journey into your product. I think about it like you're telling a story, and which is the user is telling their own story of your product, essentially. So you can think about it almost exactly like any story through the ages. The first sentence has to be interesting enough to get them to read the first paragraph. Then you can make your case for them to read the first chapter, and the same sort of thing has to be thought through in an onboarding process. You can't be boring in the first sentence or the first 5 seconds on the website, or they're just going to bounce and take off. So
that's great.
Yeah,
great,
it's
great
a value
thought.
proposition, right? Like, what are you proposing to them, like as the hook? At first for us it was earn value from your data, and now it's sort of like data is your human right. So we keep trying to see what
It is a
people.
human right. That's big.
Your data,
I like it.
owning your data is your human right. Yes.
I mean, I think building on something I said earlier, I do think it's really critical to just think about like who is your user. I mean, to me, when I think about UX, I think it's all based on empathy. Like you have to understand your user and really get into their shoes. And the reality is, if you're building a crypto app where you're trying to get people to use it right now, your user is highly technical. They are very deep into crypto. And too often, I feel like there's this weird tension where I see like teams trying to really have a good UX, and what that actually means is trying to just like abstract and hide all of crypto. And like that's just the wrong call today. Like when I get to a website and I can't connect my wallet and it's asking me to like sign up with an email address, I'm just like, what is this? Like I thought we were building in crypto. And I think even just micro things like not explaining how I can get the transaction hash of a transaction that just happened, or showing me the status of a transaction. Like these details matter a ton right now because your user today expects it. And I think that's the stuff that we should be leaning into right now. And to your point, educating users. Like I would like to believe that we're a few years out from actually solving a lot of these problems and bringing in mainstream users. But today, it's much more important that someone actually understands what's happening than trying to abstract it all away.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Great, great stuff. So anyone in the audience who would like to go in the back?
Race
all the way in the back. Then we'll go there.
Thank you. I'm Eugene from Netcar. We are building a non-custodial on-chain trading platform on multi-chain. I like how the measure makes it really easy for deposit, to the non-custodial wallet, and I believe there are tons of very difficult problems you had to solve to make it possible. So I want to understand what's in the box. So what was the biggest problem you had to solve to make it work, and what was your solution?
The biggest problem we had to solve was finding banks to work with, by far. When we started, there was I would say maybe 20 different banks and payment platforms that were willing to work with us. And then over the course of first Terra, then FTX, then et cetera, that dwindled to almost nothing. So that by far is the biggest problem. I think that's why, kind of similar to what we were talking about with AI and blockchain and multi-chain, I think it's about being able to pivot really quickly. So we've built our systems in a way where we can switch banks, add different payment methods, change our payment backend very, very easily.
So kind of the next question is, I have looked around many different this kind of payment solution, and then the biggest hurdle for me was for the adoption was the fee, and then I see that 1.5% is very comparative, and it's pretty. I believe it's one of the cheapest fee I ever found in the market. So to make it really possible, what I understand from the fee is that you have to pay the fee for the insurance in case the settlement, there was some problem with the settlement. So how did you make it really cheap? Is it something you take the risk of making it possible, or they the bank or the settlement layer on the fiat side, they were kind of favorable to measure?
I think so. I think the way we achieve low fees is twofold. One, we've invested an incredible amount into fraud and risk so that we can deflect a lot of fraud that would normally cause the fee to go up. And then I think the other big thing that we're doing is just thinking longer term. We deeply understand the unit economics of payments at scale. And what I always find funny is people chasing margins right now, and it's we're a fraction of 1% of what this market can be. And anyone who's looking at it differently, I don't know what they're doing here. So to me, at scale, these are even with a 1.5% fee, I'm this is a fantastic business. I look at our eventual net revenue margins, and it's this rivals ID and Stripe, et cetera. So I'm this is a great business. It's just about reaching scale. And the worst thing we could do right now is try to make a little bit of money, which would actually hurt the ecosystem's ability to scale.
So I have a question. I'm not in crypto. You mentioned off-ramping, and that is the reason why I'm not in crypto, actually. So if you offered me $1,000 cash, $1,000 Venmo transfer, $1,000 in renminbi bank transfer, or $1,000 quick pay, or 1,500 USDC, I would not take the USDC because of
Even
off-ramping.
right now?
Right now. Oof. And the reason for that is because if you give me 1,500 USDC, I have to worry about taxes. I have to worry about getting a exchange account. I have to worry about shit, what am I getting reported on? You give me Venmo, you label it splitting the rent. I never have to worry about it again.
You're highlighting my favorite example of why Venmo's broken. That they now are forcing you to pay if you use it for businesses. It's bullshit.
Or if you give me $1,000 cash, I could just deposit my account and be yeah, my brother gave it to me or whatever, and I didn't have to worry about that again. You give me $1,000 renminbi bank transfer, U.S. government never needs to know. But you give me 1,500 USDC, I have to pay 47% tax on it. I'm well, that's not even worth $1,000. Why give me this useless shit? So
the tax implication is a great point, and honestly, it's something that I think we underappreciate, and that's where I think there's a lot of focus in the industry on regulatory uncertainty, but the reality is a lot of that has more to do with speculation and securities, which I hope the average user is primarily using stablecoins, and they shouldn't have to think about that. But we can't even get there unless there's some amount of regulatory clarity. And so, yeah, I think that frankly, I think you're probably right. You shouldn't take USDC right now. I mean, I think right now, one is actually making it possible so that at least there is an easy way to off-ramp. But over time, taxes is definitely something that we're actually quite interested in. In our mind, long term, I think if we're successful, I want to offer the same services that like a Coinbase or a centralized exchange would, but just for users across any app that they use.
What would you say is the biggest challenge to UX that people don't really talk about?
I have a really good short one, like just writing and like text and copy. Like by far, I feel like that is the thing I spend the most time on. And it's just like underrated. Like how do you communicate something in 3 words? It's very, very hard.
I think I've written more the past 7 years of my life than ever. So much. I'm a designer and I'm sitting around writing all the time. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. The hardest and probably most important thing is getting your message focused down enough. I think most things have too many words, and you need to cut 30% of them or more. Cut them to 1/3 of what you started with.
There's an old saying, I would have written you a shorter letter if I'd had more time. And that was, I think, Mark Twain who said it. So yes, so I think we all appreciate that problem. Great question.
Hi, my name is Yanni. I work on Mina Protocol, which is a ZK Layer 1. But Ben, I had a question for you. Something you said was really interesting about, and I thought it was really contrarian about abstracting away is like bad UX. And because I think about this a lot, I'm not a UX person, I'm an engineer, but do you really think that is to your own product, or is this like to the broad ecosystem?
To the broader ecosystem.
Oh, really? Like, and it also seems like in conflict with bringing on the next big wave of users, like what you said. It just seems like is there a balance there? Or do you?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, to your own, like what you were saying, it's all about the user. Who are you writing it for? Who's using what you're designing for? You know, and then so yeah, maybe abstraction is appropriate in some cases, but not others. You know, you want to build trust and exude the values of your product and your brand and the experience that but you need to know your user and then put it in front of them and make sure they get it, because yeah, you got to make sure it has to be usable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me, if you're building an app that actually genuinely is valuable to a new segment of users, then yes, abstract what you can to make that a good experience for them. We're just not there, or I have yet to see that in practice, like an app that's really bringing in because like I think that we sometimes forget as an industry, like what does like real scale look like? And it's like we need apps that have multi-millions of users like active. That's what like real adoption looks like, and we just haven't gotten there yet, and that's fine. Like I think that in some ways that's what I like about crypto, is it feels like a little weird and a little silly and a little bit of a sandbox, and I think that's good. Like we should embrace that, because I think one of the things we were talking about before is like pre-crypto, like 2017 through 19, I really realized I was like very negative about technology. Like I wasn't excited or optimistic about technology. Like I'm optimistic about crypto now, partially because we're all kind of in this together and figuring it out. And then the last thing I'll say is, I do think though there's still, even if you are bringing in new users, you just have to be very careful of how you abstract crypto. It's because this is a very complicated set of technology, and like the worst thing you could do is abstract something and actually make it harder or worse for the user over time. And I would argue like almost all of CeFi, FTX, etc., are perfect examples of that. Like they're abstractions, but to what end?
Yeah, I would agree with you as far as not wanting to hide things that are important information for the user to know. I think one of the key values that we bring with crypto technology is the transparency and auditability by the end user. So I don't think we can sacrifice that and really deliver the value of crypto. But it's a big challenge, like both of you have mentioned, that there needs to be education. And essentially, I think of usability as making that education smooth and natural, so that each step as someone gets into the product, they're educated sufficiently to move on to the next step. You aren't papering over stuff.
Right. This is a question actually primarily for you, Ben, because you just mentioned fraud and risk and compliance and all that. What I'm particularly curious about, and this is admittedly a very broad question, what is the core of good fraud detection in Web3, given that, as you were saying, you only have this one point of attack. You have to know at the time of the transaction whether it's fraudulent or not. How do you detect that?
I think today the reality is it's not very different from Web 2. It's like basically collect as much data as you can about the user and triangulate it across as many data sources as you can. What I get excited about is a future where the majority of users have like real on-chain history that's immutable and verifiable. That becomes this like gold mine of like proof that you are a legitimate user. Like the strongest way we prevented fraud at Venmo was something we developed in-house called Social Score, which is roughly like taking the PageRank algorithm and applying it to like the Venmo social network. And it was absurdly predictive at this is a good legitimate user and this is not. And I believe you can replicate almost the exact same thing on chain.
So I want to go back to a question about messaging. So we've been running our business about 2 years, and it's really funny to me, and I've seen this before with other startups, we're still struggling with our core messaging. And the question I would ask is, ideally, you want to, people will say, you want the audience, whether it's an investor or a user, to walk away with 3 big ideas, right, and not 10. And let's say you're thinking in terms of benefits to the user. I think the core issue for us, but this is a universal question. If you boil it down to 3, you may not be very differentiated versus your competitors, because it's the secondary benefits that may actually be the differentiators. So I'm curious how you boil things down to 3 core messages that are the foundation of what you're doing and still differentiate yourself from competitors.
I mean, I would do the like a little bit of the Simon Sinek, like the who, the what, the why. Like, is it the why? You're leading with the why, the what, or the how. This is like the golden circle. That sort of framework is an excellent framework to use. There's other design thinking frameworks you could try to really narrow it down and get to the essence. And then like, what's your X factor thing? What's the thing that differentiates you from the rest, and then putting that all into. But it's usually the why that you want to lead with, not the what or the how.
I think I'd add to that. I think that's a great answer, but it's like it goes back to empathy. Like, to me, like whether or not you can differentiate that's your problem, not the user's problem. Like, the user's problem is like, I'm looking at 15 tabs and I'm just trying to figure out what should I actually even spend the time to go deeper on. So to me, like, that's where you start. Like, whether or not you can differentiate in those 3 bullets, I think you need to be okay whether or not that's true. And because you should be meeting that user need, and then that earns you the right to kind of tell the full story.
I guess if you're innovating something completely new, then you are going to be differentiated. And that's really tough too, to boil that down to 3 key points. But if you're developing another Venmo app, you could start with, we're just like Venmo, except, then you add on your differentiators.
Let's go back and ask a couple of questions on so abstraction. Are we using abstraction, especially when we talk about like FTX, abstraction and hiding, like kind of like synonymously? Because I do think like there's a lot of applications, especially in like second world, third world, in Africa, where there are millions of users using crypto, right? There's like apps like, like the next version of M-Pesa, right? If we have to start from like, here's where TCP/IP is for web adoption, right? We would never be here, right? So like, I'm always like, yeah, I want to lead with like Web3 and crypto and decentralization gives you all these things. But do we need to really force feed everybody about it, principles wise? Because I think, because we take pride in like making it really difficult for people. Like, it's DIY is like the standard. Like MetaMask, I think, is a horrible product, right? But everybody uses it because we have no other choice. So,
No, that's a great question.
Because I'm like, how do we traverse this? We don't need the next billion, but the next 10 million that are using it, we don't need to force feed them.
I think maybe the line, and it's like a subtle one, is do you actually have the next billion users, or are you hoping you have the next billion users? Because I agree with you. Like when you have the next billion users, then you need to meet those users where they are. And that, like, especially for Africa, Latin America, many emerging markets, they don't have even access to the technology to fully onboard. So like there, I think that's a great point. That being said, I think then you have to be very careful how you do it. And like too many teams I've seen try to simplify crypto, and by doing so, frankly, are taking on a bunch of risk, either knowing or unknowing, that can burn users later. But I think that, like, when done well for the right purpose, I think it's fantastic. Like one of my good friends is working on a remittance-based app called Sling.money, and it's awesome. Like you go to that website and you don't see anything about crypto. But what's happening behind the scenes is they're using self-custody, they're using blockchains, like it's all stablecoin based. And all those decisions were intentional. And it's a team of people that deeply understand fintech. So they're literally leveraging these technologies so they don't have to build all the cruft that we had to build in Web2. So yeah, I think that's it. It's more like, are you actually have users there? And I think especially for a lot of the established markets, we are serving that like early adopter or like innovator segment. We're not serving the early majority yet. I think you're right though, that there are regions of the world where that's not true.
It sounds to me like you're saying essentially like it's like the story where we think privacy is a value, so we're going to market our product based on we preserve people's privacy. But in reality, people don't care about privacy. Just like people aren't going to care that this thing is backed by this slow and reliable database called blockchain, right?
Oh, it's me. Hi, Mary. I am a fellow UX designer in the room. I don't know if there's other designers in the room. And I'm here because I'm a noob in crypto, and I have found it very surreal and inapproachable. And I'd like to make it better. But my question to each of you actually is, what has been the role of user research at each of your companies in trying to get at like what everyone's asking, like what do your users really care about? How have you figured that out? And has that been absorbed by product at this point? Has it been absorbed by your co-founding team?
I'll take a first stab at this one, actually. So by making this mistake several times, I figured out that like as soon as we had an idea on a napkin, like literally my co-founder who's an artist, he's got a BFA in painting here at the Institute of Art in San Francisco, and he hand drew the wireframes. I was showing them to someone who I thought would be a great client for us. Like, does this seem interesting to you? Is this useful? Like, okay, all right, now we'll actually make the Figma wireframe. Before, I want to get as much validation at every single step of the build from as many potential buyers that were the ideal customer profile we had designed at that point in time. So yeah, I would just say always be getting that feedback. And then once you have customers and you're live, you should just be emailing and calling everyone, even the freemium tier, the free people, and get as much user feedback every day of the week that you can.
Yeah, I think for us, we are design forward because one of the founders, is a designer. So we certainly, started immediately with research, and that's lucky, I guess. Some companies don't, but yeah, it's exactly what you're saying, Eric. I mean, it's like every step of the way, validate and research. And I think for us, our team too, we're really small, so I do a lot of other things like related to go-to-market strategy and sort of with pilot partners, seeing if things resonate with them and if we can, if there's a product market fit there, and look. I mean, it's like popcorn right now in AI. So every day I have to find out and figure out if this one of that just popped over there. There's is competition, or what are they doing differently? And there's a lot. I think there's a lot of opportunity for UX research right now in the field. Yeah.
Yeah, I think UX research. I come from an engineering background, and like probably a lot of the people you're going to be working with are going to be more engineering oriented. I think if there's some similarities with test-driven development, where it's like, I don't know if anyone's like a TDD maxi here, but like for me, I can't like not write tests first. Like it's really weird to me. I'm like, how do I even know my code worked? Like obviously I'm going to test it. I feel the same way about user research. It's just like you should constantly get feedback, like always. I don't know how else you build product. And I also think it's like, it's definitely not the responsibility of the design team or the product team or a UX team. It's the responsibility of everyone, especially if you're at a startup, which almost everyone building crypto are. Like everyone should be thinking about it. And the other thing I'd say is like, we have something invaluable in terms of user research with crypto, which is all the data is public. You can actually do quantitative like research in user behavior right now, like just using Dune. And if anyone's interested in doing that, I've spent a ton of time on Dune trying to do this. It's sad to me that 99% of what I see on Dune and Flipside is like meme coin analysis. So I'd love to find more people who actually want to use this data.
Yeah, I just have a few words. I mean, my team is mostly all engineers, and it's mostly all engineering driven. And we have a lot of bad design and bad user experience, but we try to partner with good designers and good UX people. And I personally have some experience doing UX studies and UX design, so I really appreciate it, and I think our team needs more of it.
Okay, I think we're out of. Oh, okay. Not one more. Sorry, you were asking for a while. Okay, sorry.
Hey, great panel. So Ben, you mentioned it was too early for abstraction simplification. I'm just curious, is there, and this is a broader question, is there a piece of infrastructure that you wish you had, or that was generalized in the protocols, or whether it's an upgrade that's coming, could be a service that would be able to get you to create very intuitive, simplified user experience?
I think the best example of that is account abstraction or smart contract wallets. Call a lot of different things, but like that's the crux. Is like the idea of like a seed phrase is like a non-starter for like safe mass market use. We need like different users are going to need different things. It's like what we need is like a spectrum of options and let people kind of traverse that over time without a lot of friction. And like account abstraction does that perfectly. But to me, we have to enshrine it in the protocol level. So that's why I get really excited about things like StarkNet, ZK Sync that are doing that now, because to me, we have to get to a world where EOAs are effectively gone and all authorization logic is programmable.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Crypto Mondays on Thursdays.
Crypto Monday, Thursday. Again, thank you again to the House of Web3. I want to point out that their co-working fees are very, very competitive, and you should all work here.